Welcome to the Find My Catalyst podcast. We all have problems we're looking to solve, and we know that there are solutions out there, but we struggle with this. How do we find the solution? Where does the nudge come from to help us take the next step and start solving tough problems? This podcast is designed to help you find your catalyst and take that next step. I'm Mike Simmons. I'm the founder of Catalyst Sale. My catalyst today is Paul Reilly. He is the author of Value-Added Selling Through Tough Times. He's a professional speaker and host of the Q&A Sales podcast. This episode is brought to you by the Catalyst Sale Game Plan. As you know, it's our approach to goal setting and execution. If you head to catalystsale.com/game, you can find more information. Let's get to the discussion. Paul, it is awesome to meet you. I have just finished listening to your book, and it's really excited about having this conversation. Why don't we just start right out of the gate and just say, why this book now?
Yeah, great question, Mike. Well, I, as a speaker, sales trainer, author, business professional, my company has one mission, and that is to help companies go out there and compete more profitably based on value and not price. And, our signature program, Value-Added Selling, really focuses on that. But we didn't have anything to help salespeople that are struggling through tough times, and organizations and business people struggling through tough times. And so the idea of this book is, okay, let's help business people become more professional, to become more effective, to sell more profitably. That was really the purpose of the book. And what's interesting is, certainly we've had tough times over the past 3 years, right? Going through this pandemic. But I started writing this book actually before the pandemic. And my thought was, okay, we're probably due for a recession sometime in the near future, right? Every 4 to 5 years, we typically have one. And so the timing just lined up that way. But the other piece was, for, let's call it, small business owners, entrepreneurs, salespeople that are, just getting started, trying to gain traction. They're always facing tough times, right? They're always facing it. That mental strength is so important if you're starting a company, if you're new to a profession. And so I've seen all these books out there. There's great books about resilience, like Angela Duckworth's Grit, any one of Jocko Willink's books on just, having that mental strength. But there really isn't one that's focused on building mental resilience from a salesperson's perspective. And so, I think about your audience, some of the tech folks out there that are creating software to solve a problem, right? They have to sell that idea, that vision to someone. When you think about a new salesperson getting started, they've got to be able to leverage their past experiences, but at the same time, they're getting into a new industry. They're going to face some tough times. So it really was about helping those individuals who are struggling and giving them a framework on how to manage that anxiety, that fear, the frustration, and really turn that into a net positive.
Why is it important to understand or even think about resilience?
I think because we're going to face failure often, sometimes daily, right? And how we bounce back from it, and understanding some of the ways we approach adversity too, or the way we respond to it rather, is important. Because once you understand yourself and maybe some of the pitfalls, some of the areas where you need to improve, you can now address it, you can improve, you can get better. So, resilience is just, it's critical in all aspects of life, and I think about this even with watching my children, right? It's interesting watching one of my daughters play soccer. She missed a goal the other day, and it was a wide open goal, right? And in the backyard, a couple of days later, she's practicing that same shot. And I'm like, what are you doing? And she's just out there kicking a ball around for her. She's like, oh, I'm just practicing that one shot. It's great to see that level of resilience. And without it, where can we go, right? Nowhere. We really can't. We're going to be stuck where we're at. And having that resilient mindset is so critical in moving forward.
I think one of the cool things that you highlight there is how this applies, whether we're talking about sales, we're talking about business, we're talking about life. It hits in all three of these things, whether it's the missing a shot and then going out and doing the work and practicing or getting over it, or missing an opportunity that you create inside your business, or ultimately seeing things shift inside the market. What's a tough timer?
Yeah, great question. So, in the book, we talk about this persona, really. We call them tough timers. All right. And that's actually part of the reason we named the website for the material, toughtimer.com. So tough timers are those mentally resilient professionals that not only bounce back, but they bounce back stronger. They find opportunities throughout the struggle, and they remain steadfast and humble. as they go through tough times. And so these individuals, we've worked with sales professionals for the past 40 years where we are analyzing what they do, how they respond. These tough timers, they just seem to thrive when others merely survive. And in the book, we've profiled them. We created a set of characteristics to really help us understand why they are successful, why they are able to push through in that.
And we've talked about the book a couple of times, but I haven't mentioned the name, Selling Through Tough Times, Selling Through Tough Times. And it's available on Kindle, it's available on Audible, it's available wherever you would find books. We're going to include links in the show notes. One of the chapters that I really liked is, and this goes all the way back to the end of the book, is you talk about leadership in tough times. And you highlight some of the common mistakes that leaders will make in tough times. And one of the mistakes that you highlighted that really resonated for me is that leaders will have the tendency to think that it's important to shield their team rather than be transparent, rather than be able to be open. Why do we fall into the trap of, one, do I remember that right? Why do we fall into, and then two, why do we fall into this trap of thinking then that's part of what we are as leaders, is this buffer or this shield?
Yeah, and I think this stems a lot, let's call it in the more bureaucratic corporate world, right? I've seen this so many times where sales leaders specifically, all right, let's call them sales managers, all right, the direct connection to salespeople or immediate supervisors, they're being bombarded with mandates and we need to do this and we need to do this. And a lot of it distracts salespeople from what they should be doing, is selling. And so sales managers in particular, they're constantly trying to be the buffer. They're trying to shield their people from all of that. Well, what happens when we fall on tough times is that they're already in that mindset of, I need to shield my people from this pain. It's kind of like the helicopter parent mindset as well, where we don't want our team to be nervous or worried or fearful or this or that, whatever it may be. I'm going to shield them from this pain that we're feeling. I'm going to shield them from the fact that our leadership team just said, hey, we're going to have to cut 500 jobs. I'm going to shield them from all of this. And it really is doing them a disservice because, Mike, as I mentioned in the book, it's trying to prevent them from experiencing that pain. That pain often acts as a catalyst for positive change, which is another thing we talk about in the book. And so, yeah, I understand what leaders are trying to do. Their heart is in the right place by trying to shield, but they need to make sure their team experiences it, that they're aware of what's going on. And not only that, but remember, fear is a motivator as well, all right? When people know that, okay, our company is not doing well or we're experiencing some challenges, people are going to work a little bit harder to create more value within that organization just because they now know what is at stake, right? They know that, okay, we need to make sure we're doing our best so that we can help our company push through. And that's part of it, is just being open and honest with what's going on.
And you highlight experience. I mean, experience is experience. So you don't gain experience by reading about it in a book. You don't gain experience by watching video of it. You might learn and maybe gain a little bit of perspective and know what to test, but experience comes from actually going out and doing the work. And if you're shielding your team from that piece, you're preventing them, or you're creating another obstacle to get in the way of their growth. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Because they're missing that opportunity. Tough times don't last forever. So you don't want to waste the opportunity while they are there to learn from them, to grow from them.
So let's talk about tough times not lasting forever. So you highlight this period that, hey, look, a recession was due to happen, or some kind of tough time was due to happen, just because of the cyclical nature of what we see inside the market.
Sure.
One of the things that you highlighted is that the length of the tough time tends to be shorter than the period of growth. Am I getting that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then go ahead.
Yeah. So what I was referring to in that is basically I took a look at the 13 recessions that we've had since the Great Depression back in 1930s, in that era.
Yeah.
And then I analyzed the previous 13 recessions and depressions prior to the Great Depression. And I kind of used the Great Depression of the 1930s as a halfway point, right? Because everyone's familiar with it. So what our research shows is that since the Great Depression, the average length of a recession has gone down. It's almost been cut in half. while the average expansion has nearly tripled. So what that tells us is that, yes, tough times happen every 5 or 6 years, right? Average speaking. But the length of that recession has actually shrunk. The tough time has actually shrunk since the Great Depression. So what that tells me is that we're getting better at managing it, right? Economically speaking, the policies and everything that we have in place, we're getting better at managing it. And tough times don't last, right? They just don't last. And I don't have the number in front of me, but I want to say it's about 10 or 11 months. It's not really that long when we think about it.
And you get into some of the signals that are out there and the data points that we can look at to start to get ourselves in a better position to prepare for some of those tough times. And it's interesting. I mean, right now we were in a period where people would say we're in the middle of tough times, and we've had this combination of tough times layered on top of each other. Whether we're talking about pandemic and dealing with all of a sudden having people who were working in an office move into a remote environment. I've been fortunate enough. I've worked remotely since 2003. So it's there. I think a lot of people in a revenue professional roles understand or have seen and experienced the value of remote work, because many of us are traveling anyway. So it doesn't matter that we're in an office. The amount of time that we spend in the office is actually a little bit smaller, depending on the type of role that you're in. But as we go through and you think about signals that can indicate where risk might be coming, what are some of those signals that you think of when identifying where there might be risk out there?
Sure. I think it's important to get your news from Wall Street and Main Street as well. So there are some, more tangible indicators that you can look at. Certainly, a decline in GDP is really the official signal of a recession, right? When you have 2 quarters of economic decline in GDP, boom, you're in a recession. All right. Now, oftentimes we can sometimes already be in a recession and not even know it until it becomes official, which is, I think, what happened right now. But also, we're going to be out of this recession before we know it as well. And we don't know how severe it's going to be. We don't know how painful it's going to be necessarily, but we do know we're going to grow from it. So obviously looking at GDP is important. Another signal, obviously looking at unemployment. As unemployment starts to drop, we're going to be facing some tough times. Interest rates, which typically have been going down prior to this past inflationary period, but typically when interest rates go down, that means the Fed is trying to stimulate some economic activity because they believe there's something going on. Housing starts. You can look at the Purchasing Managers Index, which any number above 50 means that, okay, we have plenty of economic activity going out there. That's more of a business to business metric. But there's all those metrics. There's other things though. Talking to your customers. How do you feel about the next 6 to 12 months? That's not overly scientific, but when you hear a handful of customers say, things are starting to slow down a little bit, that's an indicator. Talk to your delivery guys, right? The UPS or FedEx. Say, are you still delivering a lot of packages? Oh yeah, we're delivering more than ever. All right, that's a good sign. So you need to talk to your customers, talk to people, get a general sense, read the newspaper, and you'll get a sense. A few months ago, I remember reading in the Wall Street Journal, several well-known companies mentioned that they were going to cut jobs. They're looking to reduce their workforce by 3% and this and that. That's a signal, right? And then there's also the signal that things are just going too well. Mike, I don't know if you've ever experienced this. I talk about it in Meet the Fockers, right? That movie with Ben Stiller. In the opening credits of the movie, everything is just going well for him, right? He's hitting every green light on the way to the airport. They double booked their seats. So him and his fiance, they got first class tickets. Everything was going right. And you just knew that something was going to go wrong. You had a feeling, right? That feeling is not overly scientific, but it is real. So you just got to look at all of these different signals.
I think there have been 2 times now in this conversation where it makes me think of golf. One, your daughter missing the goal and missing the shot, and a struggle that I'm having right now with my wedges. For whatever reason, they were just not agreeing with me. And it's painful. So you go through kind of this process, and then you get into the Meet the Fockers and the regression to the mean.
Yeah.
And we'll get ourselves into situations where we might be able to string together a couple of pars, maybe even throw a birdie or two in there. And then all of a sudden there's a blow up hole. And it takes me back to that piece around resilience and being able to have the resilience to see through both the good and the bad. And if you're buffering your team from that experience, you're not creating the muscle that is necessary when you run into these tough times. I'd like to take the signal indicator discussion and shift it into what we should see with our customers when managing opportunities beyond what we're seeing in the market relative to, hey, are there broader market changes? But a lot of the questions that you are asking and the pieces around communication and the engagement are things that apply in opportunities, business opportunities that we're working on with our customers. Is that fair?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that when we think about our customers, one of the things I talk about is how during tough times, there are winners and there's going to be folks that don't win, the losers. And when you think about customers who are winners, who look at tough times and say, okay, now is an opportunity for me to grow my business. It's similar to when there's a dip in the stock market, right? When the stock market goes down, you pile money in. Well, for many business owners and, for entrepreneurs that are listening to the show, they're also going to view a tough time as an opportunity to invest in their business, where some of their competitors may get scared and may say, okay, let's hoard our resources. Let's conserve cash. Let's cut our marketing budget. Let's not advertise as much. Let's cut the training budget. Smart business people know that during a tough time, that is an opportunity to gain market share. And there's been several studies on this. There was a great article in the Harvard Business Review. They talked about how the winners after the previous Great Recession back in 08, 09, the ones that actually kept their marketing budgets in place and even bumped it up, right? They're bumping up the amount of ads that they're making. They actually gained market share and operational efficiency through that time frame. So even though there are some that are going to say, hey, let's pause, let's wait things out, let's conserve cash, there's going to be that percentage that says, no, we're going to put our foot on the gas during this time. And hey, we'll let the cards fall how they fall, but we're going to put our pedal to the metal. And that's the idea.
Yeah, and this gets into another good thing that you highlight in the book or reinforce throughout the book is the importance of mindset. Or what is our mindset as we look at market opportunity, or as we look at the way that we engage with our people inside the organization, the way that we engage with our customers? Are we taking more of a growth-oriented mind? Do we have a growth-oriented mindset, or do we have more of a fixed control mindset? And either of those approaches are going to create either opportunities or challenges for you as you move your business forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the interesting piece, about our mindset is we get to choose to focus on what we want to focus on. During tough times, it's natural to say, gosh, things are slowing down. You almost adopt a scarcity mindset where you believe opportunities are scarce, customers are scarce, my prospects of growing the business are scarce. And what's interesting is, yes, what we're facing is a tough time, but it's not going to last forever.
Yep.
And there's a great letter that I found. It was an open letter that Warren Buffett shared to the CEOs of America. And this wasn't during a recession. It was like during, I forgot the actual date. I want to say it was like 2013. There was people were concerned about a recession. And Warren Buffett basically says, of course, the future looks uncertain here in America. It has ever since 1776. and he uses that as a way to tell CEOs, look, quit being afraid. Now, if there are people out there that want to make deals and they're too uncertain about it, come to us, come to our company, because we're making deals happen. And it was really a wake-up call for CEOs to think beyond just the rumor mills and the rumblings of maybe there's going to be a recession, because sometimes we end up talking ourselves into these things as well. Have the right mindset for sure.
One of the things you highlight in the book is the importance of being a visionary. And in order to be a visionary, it's important that you can see the future through the lens of certain experience. You've been through this before.
Yeah.
You talk about pragmatic optimism and Stockdale story. What's the example that you share in the book there?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple of highlights. So being visionary means you've got to have the ability as a sales professional or even a business owner to look past the uncertainty of today knowing that you have a solid vision for the future. You know you're going to be successful. You know where you want your company to be, where you want to be. And having that dedication to that vision and having that belief in that vision gets you past the pain of today. And one example, I was at a sales kickoff meeting. This is down in Houston. And it was when the oil and gas market was absolutely tanking. I mean, it was, in this industry, is the company I was speaking to, rather, they were heavily tied to that industry. And I always like to meet the top achiever at each company I go to speak to. I want to talk to them, and I'm always leave that conversation learning more than I share. But I was talking to this one sales leader. I said, "Hey, who's your top person?" And he said, "Oh, you got to go meet our guy over here. He covers the Houston market for us. He's having a bad year, though." He said, he put out about 10 million last year is what he hit. He had a great year, but oil and gas is tanked. He'll probably finish around 3 million this year. So his business went from 10 million to 3 million. And it's a commissioned salesperson. So I said, geez, a $7 million drop? I go, how's he doing? And the sales leader said, well, why don't you go talk to him? And so I just talked to him. I didn't want to lead him down any direction, be like, man, I feel bad for you. How you doing? This and that. And I just said, hey, heard you put up 10 million last year. Now you're maybe going to come in at around 3. What's going on? And he said, I've been through this before. He goes, the oil market is tanked, right? And we know we're at a period in the cycle right now where it's going to bottom out. He goes, I've been this before several times. He goes, I'm going to go meet with my customers. I'm going to go look for prospects. I'm going to do what I can do. I'm going to control my activity level, and things are going to bounce back. And that was his attitude. He was so certain in his future success that taking a 70% cut in business wasn't going to get him down. And so it's having that vision, that pragmatic optimism too. And this is a highlight from Jim Collins' book, Good to Great. Admiral James Stockdale, who was captured during the Vietnam War, he spent several months in these prison camps being tortured, experiencing a lot of pain, a lot of frustration. And he was asked by the reporter, by Jim Collins, how were you able to survive that? And he said something along the lines of, you must maintain just an unwavering faith that you will survive regardless of what you experience. And at the same time, you must confront the most brutal facts of your reality and what they are. So, and they call that the Stockdale paradox, where you maintain that unwavering faith, but you don't let that overwhelm you to the point where you don't confront the most brutal facts of your reality. And what's interesting, many people have heard that before. It's a great message. But Jim Collins also asked him who didn't make it home. And he said, well, the optimists didn't make it home. They were the ones who said, we'll be out by spring. Spring would come and they would still be there. We'll be out by summer. Oh, we'll be out by Christmas, or we'll be out by Easter, and this and that. And they kept putting those deadlines there. And eventually they couldn't handle that devastation anymore. So it's that pragmatic optimism. It's not all rainbows and unicorns and sunshine in the business world, especially like in the tech space. I've worked with a lot of companies who are just starting up. The pain that they feel, right? In those early years, and especially as they continue to grow, and then they grow to a certain point, they reach a level of notoriety, then people start copying what they're doing and packaging it on their own. They experience all of this pain, and they have to remain optimistic, not a purely sunshine type optimism, but practical optimism where they know they're going to be successful, but they still got to confront those brutal facts that they're facing.
There's value in a healthy sense of paranoia. And
for sure.
So one of the things that you highlight when you're talking with this leading rep, high performer in the oil and gas space, and they are looking at it and they're saying, great year last year, rough year this year, I'm going to trust the process. This too shall pass. So let's get into some of the process stuff that you lay out in the book. You can have that confidence that this too shall pass when you have process to lean on, and you've worked that process and know that process works. So why is process important to you?
Process is important for several reasons, but number one, it gives you guidance, right? So that's important to note. As you go through tough times, you face uncertainty. You challenge your own mindset. You're starting to think, okay, is this the path that I should be on? Process almost acts as the guardrails on a highway, right? You may bounce around a little bit, but hey, if I stay within these guideposts here, I'll be in good shape. So process, it gives you comfort. It provides guidance. It helps remove some of the anxiousness and fear that comes along with tough times.
So let's walk through the process that you share in the book. And,
Sure.
So let's walk through. I have Discover on the front end, but I know that there was something before Discover.
Yeah, sure. So it's basically the 6 critical selling activities that encompass the process.
Thank you.
And this is pretty similar to most sales processes out there. I want to be very clear here. What I'm about to share is not earth-shattering, groundbreaking. It's simple, basic sales process. And you read any good sales book and they're going to have something similar. So number 1, you select the right opportunities. Number 2, you pursue those opportunities the right way. Number 3, you discover the client's needs, right? That's the discovery process. And then 4th, you persuade that buyer, right? Our discovery certainly must precede persuasion. And then here's where it really gets interesting. Partner. Partner is the 5th piece, all right? And then leverage is 6. Now, I say 5 partner is interesting because too often people use that word partnering in the wrong context. And I hear salespeople use it all the time. Hey, we're going to partner with you from the very beginning, and we're going to partner this way and that way. And they use the term too much on the front end of the sale. You can only become a partner after the sale takes place. That's where partnering really begins with a customer, is when they become a customer, not when they're a prospect. You don't partner with prospects. You sell to prospects. You partner with customers. And we spend a lot of time focusing on partnering because during tough times, those are great partnering opportunities with your customers to support them. People that bleed together, they stay together. So if you and your customers go through tough times together and you come out better on the other side, I can't think of a better way to build loyalty between a customer and a company.
I think the thing that jumps out to me as you walk through it is, I think people who are listening, who are engaging in this conversation, they can start thinking about, if I'm engaged in a relationship with my customer and it's really hard for me to articulate their perspective of the value that they receive out of the relationship and the impact that it's having on their business, then I do not have a strong relationship from a partnering perspective. And now I need to either figure out how to fix that or how to address that so I can address those individual gaps, or be comfortable with the idea that there's high risk here, that when this partner that I think I have has to make some tough decisions, one of the tough decisions may be my product or my service or my something being on the chopping block. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, that always is going to happen. And what happens, in business, there's an equity gap. So, your customers, they're looking at the price they pay, they're looking at what they sacrifice, and they're comparing that to the perceived value or the value that they receive. And they fundamentally look at it and say, okay, is this a fair exchange? Right now, there are several factors that will influence how that question is answered in their mind. And one of which is the competitive nature of your industry. Because you got to remember, during tough times, other companies are scrambling. They're trying to keep business. They're trying to grow their business. And so they're knocking on your customer's door, offering, discounted prices, all of this value for less than what they're paying from you. And what happens is naturally the customer starts to question, okay, am I really getting the best deal? All right. Now there's ways to prevent that. All right. Number 1 is constantly looking for ways to recreate value, regenerate value for that customer, and treating your best customers like they're your best prospects, because they are for the competition, right? So recreating value and also reminding customers of that value, because as most people are unaware of the air they breathe, most customers are unaware of the value they receive. Many of our customers, they forget about all the things that we do for them. And it's not like they're trying to avoid giving us credit. They just don't think about it. It's not a priority, right? Mike, for example, I got my Jeep today, and as soon as I put the start button, I didn't sit there for a minute and think, wow, my Jeep actually started today. Chrysler nailed it with this one, right? You don't think about it because it just works. So you got to remind customers of that value, because as they become unaware of the value, price becomes a bigger issue. They look for other companies that they can work with.
So how do you define value?
So I don't. The customer does. That's one of the most important aspects. I'll give you a much better response than that. But
No,
it brings me to the first point.
That's the perfect response, and I think it bears repeating.
Yeah,
I don't. The customer does.
yeah.
Right? Value is perception on the other side. So, which are better or more comprehensive?
So, first and foremost, the customer defines value, and it's their definition of value that really matters. So value it's like beauty. It's in the eye of the beholder, and it's based on their perception, yes. But value is also an outcome. At a basic level, customers, they look at what they sacrifice, they compare that to what they gain. And as long as what they gain is greater than what they sacrifice, we call that value. And we use that logic to make many decisions, right? Am I going to invest in this company? All right, here's what I sacrifice. Here's what I could potentially gain. As long as it's greater, maybe I will, right? Should I meet with this salesperson? What am I sacrificing? What am I going to gain? Like we're always weighing out sacrifices to gains. And so with value is an outcome, right? It's something that the customer gains when they experience your solution.
Yeah, it sounds like you're talking about trading. So we're trading something at some point in time. All of us are trading something at some point in time. You're trading time for this conversation for us to have on a podcast. People are trading time to listen to this conversation. And ideally, they will, some of the value they'll get out of it is they're either going to think differently about work that they're doing. They're going to shift mindset or perspective around the work that's happening. They're going to, even better, actually take action, put that work into action and start testing it for themselves. I think that is one of the biggest challenges and misperceptions out there is that we create value through the lens that we're working through things. And if we're not doing that through the lens of the person who we're serving, we're going to get ourselves into a situation where we might be building in the wrong direction.
No, that's absolutely right. When we create value or add value, however you want to frame it, it must be relevant to the customer, right? It must be recognized by them. And we've got to view the world through their eyes to see as they see, feel as they feel. And in doing so, we gain a deeper understanding of how they define value. And this is what's interesting. Some of the business professional salespeople that I see struggling with this concept tend to be market leaders in an industry because they've created such a great product. They've created such a revolutionary software or solution, whatever it may be, to where they think that they can rely on that as the crutch to basically carry them through. Well, that's not always the case, because sometimes having that market leadership position can create a lazy salesperson, because if they're just relying on the product, what value do they personally bring? And then that also puts us in the mindset of, we call it drinking the Kool-Aid, where you think you are the best and you're sharing that and expect people to pay for the best and experience the best. But that's not always the case.
I had a while back, I had a rep who worked for me. And when I asked this question about what value do you deliver to your customers, how's that perceived? The response was, I make sure that they get the best price. And it really was about pricing and discounting and pushing for that next discount. And it was frightening to me because we get ourselves into situations. So this is a person who's on my team. So I'm leading this team in one way, shape, or another. And this is the perspective that's out there. Now, fortunately, I was able to identify it through the questions I asked, and reinforcing the importance of being able to go out there and ask questions and engaging with your people and understanding and not making assumptions. But we've got to be careful about how, like the way that you highlighted it, the laziness that can happen when you are a market leader, when you feel like people work with you because of this brand, this logo, this thing that's out there. And you get into what's the old quote? Nobody got fired for hiring IBM. And there's, it gets repeated because there's truth to it. And there are a number of people who will work with consultants because they'll work with Deloitte, or they'll work with Bain, or they'll work with BCG, or they'll work with these name brands, because then when they get into the conversation, it's, well, we got it from this logo. We did it this way. I think the question comes back to, what was the actual impact? What changed? What happened? How did that actually start to shift what was delivered inside the organization, how people approach things? So yeah, the value is an interesting word and an interesting thing to discuss. So if you're not discussing that with your team, make sure you take some time and discuss it with your team. And beyond that, talk with your customers, ask the market, go back to the data that we were talking about earlier, where Paul had mentioned, hey, talk to the UPS driver and find out what's changing in their market. When you get out there and engage with folks. Paul, one of the things you highlight from a process perspective that I think is really important and I think people struggle with in tough times is this idea of focusing on an ideal customer, a target customer, a specific type of customer, rather than trying to be something for everyone, be something for the right folks. How do you think about ideal customer and that level of clarity, and why is that important?
Yeah, it's one of the first steps in the process for a reason. It's extremely important because any business out there, it's so critically important that you have a crystal clear understanding of who is your ideal customer, right? And the easiest way to do it is not really that scientific either. I know there's probably better ways you can do this, and there's software you can buy and algorithms you can go through, but simply put, look at your best customers. Take a look at your top, 10, 15%, the customers that you want more of, okay? Figure out what they all have in common with one another. It could be a certain industry size, financial viability, the structure of their organization, private versus public. Take a look at all the factors that really lead to that common profile. And then that's your profile for prospects that you need to go look for. Because on paper, your best prospects and your best customers are going to look very similar. So we want to focus on that, but that's not enough, right? It's also about knowing which business you want to avoid, right? And we talk about that in the book, we call them the profit piranhas, right? These are those opportunities that complain more, they return goods more often, they ask for more concessions, they want more discounts, they create internal strife, they eat away at all your resources. I remember one of my buddies actually, his company used to sell to Walmart, right? And they made the decision to stop selling to Walmart. They made the decision they're just going to stop. Now, Walmart was their largest revenue producing customer. So they stopped selling to Walmart, and they ended up making more net profit the next year than they did the previous year. And so that's the key is it's never a good idea to call on bad business anytime, but it can be detrimental during tough times because resources are already scarce. And so you want to make sure that you're investing in the most ideal opportunities. So create that profile. And, our research shows most organizations don't have a profile. They can't tell you, okay, what is good business for your company?
I think you said 17% don't inside the book. Like
only 17% have a profile.
Oh, so 17% do have a profile.
So that means 83% don't.
83% don't. 83% don't.
Yeah.
There are people who are out there listening right now and they're like, well, we can do this and we can do this. You can do a lot. You can kind of squint and manufacture fit. It creates that challenge where your top line revenue might look really good, but your profit margin is struggling. And then you start to think about what's the resource constraint on people inside the business, not only the money side, but the people side and the fulfillment that they have in the work and the amount of time that they're spending doing extra things to make this thing work. And, people will talk about throwing good money after bad. And these things become easy to say, hard to execute on. But this story that, Paul was talking about and the example of walking away from the biggest top line revenue customer, Walmart, and then having the follow on of becoming more profitable is really powerful. So it reinforces that piece around measuring what matters and making sure that you're measuring the right metric and aligned inside your business on the right metric. When you talk a bit about alignment, what does alignment mean to you?
Yeah, so alignment is about getting a clear understanding of how your customer defines value, and then you align your solution with their definition of value. So, and another word we could use besides value is outcomes, right? What outcomes do your customers care about? And this includes the different types of decision makers because each different decision maker could have different outcomes. One example of this, I do a lot of work in banking, right? And I was talking with one of my banking clients, and they were going to meet with a small business owner to try to switch over their banking relationship. And throughout the discovery, the banker realized that the small business owner really cares about growing and scaling their business. That's the outcome that the customer was focused on. So the salesperson, the banker in this case, he had to align his solution with that outcome in mind. And so when he would go back and present all of the capabilities of his bank, right, which didn't change regardless of what the outcome is, all he had to do was link it to that outcome of growth and scaling. And so he would begin the presentation by saying, okay, here's how we're going to help you grow and scale your business. They offer this service, they offer that. And every time he mentioned the service or the banking product, it led back to growing and scaling that customer's business. And so from a perception standpoint, that small business owner believed that this banker really does understand what he's trying to achieve. And he had that alignment. So he's more likely to move forward with them. Alignment is key, not only with outcomes, but also, company values. I had an opportunity to go out in the field and watch a strategic account manager, high-level salesperson present his company to a large engineering firm, one of the biggest in the country. And these are two big companies presenting, or one big company presenting to another big company. And here's what the salesperson did to kick off the presentation. He went side by side and showed what his company has in common with the prospect's company. And everything from employee size, number of locations, mission statement, values, core values. And he began the presentation by saying, gosh, two companies that look this similar should be doing business together. So that's alignment in another sense as well, but both equally important.
It's really powerful to create that common ground, that level of consistency and likeness, similarity. Paul, you wrap up the book with a quote from Shawshank Redemption around hope. What's the quote? Why is that important?
Yeah. So I you're not supposed to admit who your favorite child is, and an author should never admit what chapter is their favorite. I'll say this is chapter 17, my favorite chapter. And here's the quote. It was by Andy Dufresne. If you remember, he was wrongfully imprisoned in the movie The Shawshank Redemption. And he wrote his friend Red, who was played by Morgan Freeman, a note. And in the note, he says, "Remember, Red, hope is a good thing, maybe the best of things, and no good thing ever dies." So the reason I ended with this, number one, I love the movie. It's widely accepted as one of the best movies of all time, but it's certainly a hopeful message right at the end, right? Where hope is so important. And that's what I talk about in the final chapter. And I remember I one time heard hope defined as a deep desire for something to happen, coupled with an unwavering belief that it actually will happen. And I thought that is a great definition of hope. And it's a great message because, you think about it, whether you are a business professional, the human resources VP, a salesperson, an entrepreneur just starting your business, you're going to need hope. All right. Now, here's the challenge. Hope is often needed the most when it is the hardest to find. You think about that. And Mike, you've seen this, and it was some of the entrepreneurs you've worked with and interviewed, is that, there are those moments where we are just knocking on the door of what seems like a permanent failure. And at those moments, we need hope. We need hope more so than ever before. And so this final chapter is really about finding that hope, the importance of hope and holding on to it. And, my hope for everyone that's listening to this podcast, if they're experiencing tough times in their life, whether it's personally, whether it's professionally, my hope for them is that they just last long enough to catalyze that positive change in your life, but they don't last any longer than that, right? I hope that they're able to find a way to create more value for their company or create more value in this world even, because times give us that opportunity, right? And so hope is critical, and it's so crucial as you go through tough times. And that's that's the biggest mistake that anyone can make in tough times. It's not losing a sale. It's not losing a customer. It's losing hope. So we got to hold on to that. Hold on to that hope.
Hold on to that hope. Can't think of a better way to wrap up the conversation. Paul, thanks for doing this. Awesome conversation. Where can people find out more about you and what you're working on?
Sure, absolutely. So I'm most active on LinkedIn. So, I'm sharing quite a bit of content, sales-related content, business-related content on a daily basis. So yeah, follow me on LinkedIn. Just look for Paul Reilly. Look for the mug. You'll see it right there. You can also visit the website that we created for this book. In fact, there's a lot of free resources on the website. The website is toughtimer.com, TOUGHTIMER.com. And there you can actually download some templates and complimentary chapters. In fact, one of the chapters we have is on how to craft your customer message during tough times. So it's really practical for any business owner, salesperson listening, anyone really. If you want to work on your messaging during tough times, I offer you a template really on how to make it happen, and it's included in the chapter. So all that's available at toughtimer.com.
Awesome. We will include links in the show notes. If you know anyone who would find value in this conversation, please share it. Let Paul and I know via LinkedIn. We're both active on LinkedIn. We like to see those shares, and they help create exposure to the content and ultimately get to the point where people can start doing the work that will impact how they think about their work, how they feel about their work, how they execute on their work. Sales is a thinking process. Life is a thinking process. Business is a thinking process. How are you thinking differently about your process?